What's up, everyone? Today is January 9th of 2024, and in today's video, we're going to do one of my favorite types of decodes, a decode on the moon. Now, just a couple hours before I went live today, we learned that the Peregrine Mission 1, which is a lunar lander mission from a company called Astrobotic Technology, which has been funded by NASA, apparently they suffered an issue, and this lunar landing mission will be abandoned. However, we're still going to look at the numerology of the date of the launch, as well as the planned landing date of February 23rd, to talk about how NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, uses numerology to conduct its business. And to understand this, we're going to look at the synchronicity involving the Peregrine Mission 1 with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, a peregrine is a type of falcon, of course, and this mission launched just a couple of hours after the Atlanta Falcons fired their head coach named Arthur Smith. So we'll review his numerology, his very interesting birthday, and then we'll also take a dive back into history. The forefather of the moon missions for NASA was Wernher von Braun, a man whose numerology just literally spits the moon right at you. And then we'll also discuss how this connects to the old Apollo missions, the first moon landing, Apollo 11, taking place in 1969, and then the last U.S. manned moon landing back in 1972, Apollo 17. And what will really bring all of this together is understanding how this connects to Super Bowl 51. Now, this game, which was really one of the most famous Super Bowls in NFL history, ultimately known as the comeback, as the Patriots overcame a 25-point deficit to win this game. This is another game littered with moon numerology, and as it turns out, it appears to all be pointing towards this failed lunar landing mission. So once again, the name of this mission, Peregrine Mission 1, this points to a type of falcon. And the Atlanta Falcons firing Arthur Smith, literally just about 2 hours before the launch of this spacecraft. Now, the Falcons recently played in one Super Bowl. I believe they also played in Super Bowl 33, but this is definitely connected to 51 back in 2017. And of course, don't forget the moon. The word moon has this gematria of 51 using the reverse alphabetic order. So in this game, Super Bowl 51, the Falcons took a 25-point lead when they scored their 28th point. So think about this in terms of 25-28. Well, measuring from the date of this game to the launch of Peregrine Mission 1 on January 8th, yesterday, this was 2,528 days. But this number is very intriguing for another reason. If you measure from NASA's founding date, July 29th of 1958, to June 30th of 1965, the official establishment date of the Atlanta Falcons, you find another 2,528-day gap. The date of this launch, January 8th, had what we call primary numerology of 53. And this is achieved by adding the digits in the date as you would say them out loud. 1 plus 8 plus 20 plus 24. This gives us a sum of 53. In the reduction form of Gematria, one of the 4 base methods, here we see the alphabetic order, the most basic standard cipher. This method can also be reversed or reduced, also called Pythagorean Gematria. This uses the rules of numerology to drop every double-digit number to a single digit prior to adding it to the equation. And here we see that moon landing has this gematria of 53. Well, there's another 53 in the gematria when we look at Satanic Gematria. This, a very special cipher, built around the number 666. as you'll see, Satanic Gematria sums to 666 in this method. And that's an important number to NASA, which is officially known as the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which has reverse gematria of 666. Now, at the end of this video, we'll focus more on this number, this special number of the beast, as it's known. But before we do, I want to point out how moon landing sums to 503 in Satanic Gematria. So we get a 53 and a 503 connecting to the date numerology. Well, just hours before the launch, the Atlanta Falcons lost their 503rd game in franchise history to the New Orleans Saints. 503 is a prime number divisible only by 1 and itself. And we see that 503 is the 96th prime number. With capital letters taken into account, a cipher called caps added, another method based on the alphabetic order but with 26 added for each capital. Notice how Falcon sums to 96. 96 is also the ordinal sum of Freemason. And when it comes to NASA, the riddle connected to Freemasonry is, of course, very strong. We'll look at this in a little bit. First, I want to point out Arthur Smith, the head coach of the Falcons, who was fired after their loss to the Saints to end the 2023 season. In Gematria, both ordinal and reverse, his nickname Art Smith has double Gematria of 108. And consider this in relation to the date of the Peregrine launch, January 8th, or 108, as we write it on the calendar. Gematria is geometry within the language, and in this case, it's also symmetry, as geometry sums to 108 in both ordinal and reverse. The phrase full moon also serves up a double 108. And think about how the moon is 108 times its own diameter from the Earth. This also applies to the sun. 108 suns away from the Earth. On top of that, the sun is also approximately 108 Earths wide. So, what a great date for a craft to launch to the moon, January 8th. Internationally, such as in the country of Germany, the date would be written as 8/1 or 81. This brings us to German scientist Wernher von Braun, who used to work for the Nazi regime before that regime was absorbed into NASA. And I want to point out how the name Wernher von Braun sums to 81 in reduction and reverse reduction. So every celestial object in the sky that we can see has its own magic square. And I'm going to jump down to the magic square of the moon. Now this square has 81 smaller squares in it. And here we see that the father of the moon missions, Wernher von Braun, has the double 81. Well, the 81st triangular number is 3321. And what that means is that if you add up every number in this magic square, 1 through 81, you get a sum of 3321. In Latin Gematria, which I consider to be the most significant cipher in this study, von Braun's full name, Werner Magnus Maximilian Friar von Braun, sums to 3321. In fact, Wernher von Braun has basically the same digits, 2231. This Latin method, structured similarly to Hebrew Gematria, Greek isopsephy, but uses the classical Latin alphabetic order with modern English characters thrown at the end. Now, when Apollo 11 first landed on the moon, the first ever manned moon landing, reportedly, Wernher von Braun was 2,991 weeks old in one day. And that's interesting because in Latin Gematria, moon landing equals 291. Peregrine's January 8th launch fell 291 days after von Braun's March 23rd birthday. And we know this isn't a coincidence because in the same Latin method where moon landing equals 291, Peregrine also sums to 291. In fact, with reverse caps mixed, we see that Peregrine actually has double gematria of 291. This brings us to the Atlanta Falcons. And in reverse caps, notice how Atlanta Falcons also sums to 291. The man who just got fired for the Falcons, he has another nickname, Artie Smith. And in Gematria, Artie Smith is a supermatch with Astrobotic, which is the name of the company responsible for the Peregrine launch. Both have 122, 148, and 67 Gematria. Astrobotic's full name is Astrobotic Technology, Inc. And what stands out about this Gematria right here is the standard alphabetic order, 272. When you divide the diameter of the moon by the diameter of the Earth, you get this 0.272 repeating. So a significant moon number coded into this company, who has now failed to bring us to the moon. So before I get into the meat of this video, where we really look at the moon and 666, I want to quickly touch on this Freemasonry riddle. Once again, NASA founded in the year 58 on a very Masonic date. And I have no question that of all organizations in the government, perhaps NASA is the most Masonic in nature, sworn to secrecy. And when you look at this founding date, July 29th of 1958, notice you get this 113 date gematria. And we're talking about the Scottish rite of Freemasonry. Scottish equals 113. And of course, 113, the biggest number of deception, like the word dishonest or not honest, 113 as well. Not true, 113. Perjury, 113. This list goes on and on. There's a lot of words about lying with that value. So let's quickly look at Freemasonry, the ancient and accepted Scottish rite. Now, as the Wikipedia page here shows, the "and" is sometimes omitted. You'll see it omits the "and" in the name. So we can write this with or without the "and." And if you do include the "and," you get a satanic sum of 1972 for ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry. 1972 was the year of the last manned moon mission, Apollo 17, taking off, landing, and returning in 1972. If you measure from that launch on December 7th of 1972 to the date of the Peregrine launch, you get a span of 18,660 days. Well, in Latin Gematria, if you exclude the "and," you get Gematria of 1866. Freemasonry sums to 58 in reduction, and 58 is the year that NASA was established. The Atlanta Falcons just finished their 58th season in the NFL, with their coach getting fired just after the game, a couple hours before this launch. NASA was also 58 years old when the Falcons lost this Super Bowl to the New England Patriots. But notice the exact date for NASA, 7/29. There's a very significant cipher called trigonal, which uses triangular numbers associated with the alphabetic order. So you'll see it ends on 351, the 26th triangular number. Well, in this cipher, Freemason sums to 729. This brings us to the July 29th date of NASA's founding, 729. Now, this date can also be written as 29/7, like 297. And in the same cipher, NASA sums to 297. In the reverse Satanic method, Atlanta Falcons equals 729. On the date of the Peregrine Mission 1 launch, the Atlanta Falcons were 702 months and 9 days old. And once again, this name of this mission, Peregrine Mission 1. In base Gematria, if you add these four numbers, 229, 284, 112, and 104, you also get a sum of 729. So just a lot of alignments here with this number. Falcons and Atlanta Falcons both match Freemasonry, NASA, and Lunar lander. And notice how this launch was 139 days after India's spacecraft landed on the moon in August of last year. 139 like Falcons, Atlanta Falcons, Freemasonry, and NASA. All right, so let's look at the solid numerology with this event. All the way down to the launch time of 2:18 a.m. Now, we see this number 218 a lot when it comes to the moon. The Apollo 11 mission, for like 50 years, we were told that it was 2018 that this Apollo 11 craft landed on the moon, but they since changed it to 2017. And that's, of course, interesting because 2017 is the year that Super Bowl 51 was played. But in ancient Hebrew Gematria, the language where Gematria is believed to have originated, the word moon sums to 218. And Falcons coach Arthur Smith, who was sacked from his job the same day, notice how his birthday leaves 218 days on the calendar. The Peregrine craft was scheduled to land on February 23rd, which falls 218 days after July 20th. July 20th, the date of the first ever manned lunar landing. But this planned landing date, February 23rd, this is another huge number for the moon. February 23rd is written 2/23. And if you include the word the moon sums to 223 in Hebrew Gematria. In Super Bowl 51, there was this miraculous catch from Julian Edelman where he snagged the ball from the tip of the grass on the field. And when he made this completion, notice how there were 2 minutes and 23 seconds on the clock. And the two Falcons players on top of him, you can see number 22 and number 3. 2, 2, 3. Julian Edelman was born on May 22nd, which is the date that leaves 223 days on the calendar. This game was played as Super Bowl 51. And notice how Super Bowl 51 has Gematria of 2023. The quarterback who ended up winning this game, Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr., his name has Gematria of 2023 and 2203. His first name, Thomas, is the middle name of Matt Ryan, who opposed Tom Brady in that game. And check this out. If you go from Matt Ryan's birthday on May 17th of 1985 to the scheduled landing date for this spacecraft, he would have been exactly 2,023 weeks old on 2/23. The number 223 is the 48th prime number, and this also connects to the moon. The Latin name for the moon is Luna. One of the Indian names for the moon, in fact, Soma, also yielding a 48. And don't forget, guys, when it comes to the number 223, this is the number of lunar phases in the Saros cycle, which allows us to predict the next solar or lunar eclipse. So when the Falcons lost just before Arthur Smith got fired, notice how they gave up a total of 48 points to the New Orleans Saints. Again, part of this whole 2-2-3 riddle. Meanwhile, the Falcons scored 17 points. And this is also very significant, because in Latin Gematria, the word moon equals 170. And isn't it funny how Arthur Smith led the Atlanta Falcons to 3 straight 7-10 seasons? 7-10, 7-10, 7-10, the same digits in moon. And then they end with 17 points. This was also on January 7th, the date written 1/7. That was the final day of the NFL season. In fact, this game was tied 17-17 at one point. Well, the following day, January 8th, notice how this was a date with reduced numerology of 17. With the S exception, NASA sums to 17. As I pointed out, moon equals basically a 17 without the 0. And 17 was the year that Super Bowl 51 was played. And in reverse gematria, moon sums to 51. You could even say that this Super Bowl capped off the 2016 NFL season. And 2016, these are the same 4 digits in 2160. Now, I point this out because if you look at the equatorial radius of the moon, multiply it to get the diameter, we find this is exactly 2,160 miles. So, yeah, 2016 into 2017, very important. Notice how Arthur Smith, his full name also has this 501 with capital letters. In Super Bowl 51, the Patriots overcame a 28-3 deficit. And in fact, that's the nickname given for the game. Which is funny because the halftime show was done by Lady Gaga, who was born on the 28th of March, or 28/3. Well, in Latin Gematria, the moon sums to 283. In that same cipher, 666 also sums to 2,083. So this brings us to the last part of this video, the number 666, and how it connects to the number 201. First, we looked at Arthur William Smith, Falcons coach. His full name has gematria of 90 and 99 in reduction. 90 and 99 is also the value of the moon. The moon, 90 and 99 in upside down 666. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, fake moon landing, and Apollo all sum to 666 in gematria. Now, of any number in the English language that you spell out, the first one to have gematria of 666 is 82. And for this we use Sumerian gematria, which is the alphabetic order times 6. So we see the number 82 summing to 666. And remember, there's exactly 82 lunar phases between the two Great American total solar eclipses. This is also 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days apart. But anyway, Arthur Smith was born in the year 82. And also check out his birth date, the 27th of May, or 27/5. When you write out the number 666, it equals 275. If we instead just write 666, we get a value of 201, and this is another important number. Think about how the moon equals 21 and 210. Falcons equals 210 in Latin Gematria. NASA equals 210 in Sumerian. And NASA's founding date, July 29th, is also the 210th day on the calendar. Peregrine was scheduled to land a span of 210 days after NASA's anniversary on the 210th day of the year. Apollo 11 back in 1969, that landed on the 201st day of the year. And think about the first man to ever walk on the moon, Neil Armstrong, whose full name sums to 201 in that same method. Apollo equals 201 in Latin Gematria. On the date he was fired, Arthur Smith was 15,201 days old. But you'll also notice how the digits 152 are there. Well, Apollo equals 251, but NASA equals 152 in standard. And this brings us back to Neil Armstrong, who died back in 2012 in the month of August. Well, Neil Armstrong died exactly 152 sidereal months before this launch. The real kicker with Neil Armstrong, though, is if you measure from his birthday, August 5th of 1930. Measuring from that date to the launch was 1,249 sidereal months, or lunar orbits. Remember, a sidereal month is a little bit shorter than a synodic month. So Neil Armstrong would have been exactly 1,249 sidereal months old. Well, this stands out because we are currently in Braun lunation number 1,249. This number measures every new moon or synodic month since 1923. So how interesting that Neil Armstrong has this lunar age that matches the lunar number we're currently under. All right, so that's all I got on the post, but I want to point out a couple more things. We've been talking a lot about Super Bowl 51. When you write out the number 51, it has gematria of 616. Now, I talk about this number a lot because 616 is believed to be the other number of the beast. Here we have 666, but also 616. Wernher von Braun died on June 16th, the date we write as 616 on the calendar. And intriguingly, ritual sacrifice also has this 616 value. In the alphabetic order, moon landing equals 118. Now, I don't want to get too sidetracked here, but this was a huge number in the whole Chester Bennington and Chris Cornell story. Notice how Chester Bennington died on the anniversary of the moon landing in 2017, the same year as Super Bowl 51. Well, Chris Cornell was born on July 20th, 5 years before the moon landing. And if you measure from July 20th of 64, which was Cornell's birthday, to 320 of, 75? With Bennington, 76. Notice how they were born exactly 11 years and 8 months apart. So here we have this strong moon landing connection. One guy born on the date of the moon landing, the other one dead on the date of the moon landing. 118. Well, Wernher von Braun died on a date with primary numerology of 118. And if you measure from his death to the birth of Tom Brady, who was born just a couple months later, you find that Brady was born 1 month and 18 days after that 118 date. This is also 48 days. Remember the 48th prime number, 223, the huge number of that game. Speaking of Tom Brady, check out how old he was for this launch. 16,960 days. Well, this is very similar to 1969, the year of the first moon landing. What about Matt Ryan's full name? Matthew Thomas Ryan. It stood out to me that his name sums to 224 and 2204, as this is all occurring in the first month of 2024. But in Latin Gematria, Matthew Thomas Ryan sums to 1944. This stood out because the first ever space flight, which was coordinated by Wernher von Braun, was in the year 1944. Also, in reduction, Matthew Thomas Ryan sums to 71 and 91. And Apollo sums to 71 and 91 in ordinal and reverse. Of course, the 71, the reverse of 17, a number that was of strong focus in this video. So this one went a little deep, but I mean, this is how NASA's running the show. Who knows where the end to this numerology is, but man, these alignments at the front, right? 2,528 days after the Falcons lost the Super Bowl. The Falcons founded 2,528 days after NASA. In the Super Bowl, they took a 25-point lead with their 28th point. And 28-3. It's all connected to the moon. This stuff is so undeniable. It almost hurts. But that'll do it for this video. Thanks to everybody for checking it out. If you check the links down in the description below, you'll find my video on India's Chandrayaan-3 launch, as well as a couple other relevant posts and videos. If you want to support the work and keep videos like this coming, there's a link down in the description below for that as well. And if you do join at gematrinator.com, you will also get special features for the calculator. Save your settings, create your own ciphers, things of that sort, and a whole lot more. So, all right, everybody. With 111 views on this video that I started at 1:11 p.m., I'll stop it there. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.